You're listening to the AdCast with your host, Eric Elliott.
All right, AdCast listeners, I'm going to slow it down today because I have this gentleman is I'm at a loss for words on some of the work that he's done for almost 30 years. He's been a music critic, but also over the last 25 years or more, he's been instrumental in getting justice done for a lot of people. And right before the show, we were talking, and I asked him, I said, Jim, how do you feel? And he said, it's not about me. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me today Mr. Jim DeRogatis. Jim, thank you for being a guest on the AdCast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your interest, Eric.
Yeah, you have quite a unique story, and if someone's been under a rock right now, let's tell these folks exactly who Jim DeRogatis is.
Well, I'm an associate professor in the Department of English and Creative Writing at Columbia College. I had spent before that 15 years as the pop music critic at the Chicago Sun-Times. Roger Ebert did movies. I did all of popular music. And I've written 10 books, most of them about music. And I have a radio show, Sound Opinions, that's a very popular podcast, heard around the world. And it's on 150 public radio stations across the U.S.
That's right. And also, a lot of Jim's work has actually held up and actually gotten justice for a lot of women. And for those who've seen the show Surviving R. Kelly, and also the trial of R. Kelly, a lot of Jim's work was actually very instrumental in that. But I want to go back to, I think it was in November. I think you described in your book, it was closer around probably Thanksgiving or Christmas time, one of those holidays when you guys were actually packing it up for the night. I think there was Mr. Palish and also Mary, who was actually working with you guys. And you just got this mysterious tape. You got this tape. Tell us about this. Walk us through that, Jim, on what that was like for you.
Well, the tape gets conflated with the fax, Eric. I received an anonymous fax on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving 2000. I had reviewed R. Kelly's TP2.com. It was the sequel to 12 Play, TP2.com. 12 Play, of course, because an ordinary lover, Eric, might give you 4 Play, but the sexual super freak would do 3 times better. Kelly never hid his proclivities. And I thought it was from a player hater. He's hugely beloved Black superstar in Chicago. Chicago is a racially divided town. Whenever I wrote about R&B or hip hop, that's not music, that's noise. And this sentence in air quotes had been around since I first arrived in Chicago in 1991. R. Kelly likes them young. And I will admit, I never stopped to think about what that meant. The Aaliyah thing had blown up in 1996. It was out there that they had gotten married. The record company said she was 15, but, they were also whispering maybe she's 18. Maybe they got married. Maybe they didn't. It was successfully covered up, which is hard to believe today. That two of the biggest superstars in the music world may have had an illicit, illegal, destructive relationship when she was, we now know in federal court, 14 and 15.
Wow.
All of this had been out there. No one had done any real reporting on it. I got that fax and, hey, I threw it in the slush pile, Eric, of press releases I'd never read and hate mail from people telling me I was an idiot as a critic. But I went home on Thanksgiving weekend and certain things haunted me that said that there had been an active police investigation for a year and a half. It named a lawsuit that had never been reported, filed by an underage girl, which I found hard to believe. How could this have been filed in court? Nobody wrote about it. It had specific names and dates. And I broke my rule of only going to the office once a week because they wouldn't let me sit around in my sweatpants and blast loud music. I tried to work at home. And I read it carefully. I called the Chicago Police Department switchboard, and there had been a name, a very long Polish name of a sergeant heading the investigation. And I asked for her, and they said, nobody here by that name. And I almost hung up. And I said, well, yeah, is there a similar Polish surname in sex crimes? And the operator sighed and connected me, and Sergeant Chinahuski picked up the phone. I said, I'm Jim DeRogatis from the Sun-Times. I'm calling about your investigation into R. Kelly. And she said, oh, I was wondering how long it would be before someone asked me about that. I can't talk to you, and hung up. And so from the low rent pop music critic desk in the features section next to the wonderful woman, Denise O'Neill, who put the horoscopes and comics together, I went into the city room and talked to the city editor, and he read the letter, and it was anonymous. And he said, look, I'll have Abdon Palish, the courts reporter, check and see if this lawsuit was ever filed. You keep making phone calls in the music world. And we were off and running 6 weeks of the most intense 18-hour day reporting I've ever done. That story runs December 21, 2000, right before Christmas. And Abdon and I thought, this man is finished. The level of detail, the women who had trusted us and talked to us, the lawsuit, documents we got unsealed in Michigan from the Elliott settlement. We thought he was finished. Instead, we were vilified on black radio, 2 white reporters coming after this beloved superstar. And it was really Mary Mitchell, the brilliant African-American columnist. She was 45 when she went back to college to study journalism after raising her 3 children. A true inspiration.
You give Abdon and Mary a lot of credit too. And
yeah,
I think
it was never just
very,
me.
very good.
Mary kept saying, hey, these reporters are white, so what? He is victimizing your daughters, your sisters, your aunties, your nieces. This has to stop. Black community, wake up. And, so that's 2000. It wasn't until February 2002. I was working at home. I had just finished transcribing an interview with Alicia Keys. My phone rings and it says, go to your mailbox. Click. And there was a manila envelope, unmarked, with a VHS tape, unmarked. We had heard about this apparently ongoing sexual abuse by Kelly of a 14-year-old. Her family had refused to talk to us. And here was 26 minutes and 39 seconds of the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. Kelly victimizing this girl and ultimately urinating in her mouth. Call me daddy, instructing her what to do. And we thought, once again, this is it. He's finished. But it took 6 months for Chicago authorities to indict him. When they did, it was on very narrow charges of making child pornography and not statutory rape, because the girl, her mother and her father, were in Europe for 6 or 9 months.
Which actually, if I remember correctly, he turned out to be like a bass player on his album.
Yeah,
right?
Guitarist and bassist who had played with Kelly. And the girl's aunt was Sparkle, whom Kelly had recorded and produced, and Sparkle had split from Kelly because of his behavior. When I first called her in 2000 and said, we are hearing stories of your niece, and she freaked out on me. I don't know what happens behind closed doors. You're talking about one of the loves of my life, my blood. She hung up on me. And now she was calling about this tape. There's a tape on the streets. I had said, until we have the tape, there's not much we can do, Stephanie. And then the tape appears, and I had to watch it with Sparkle, Stephanie Edwards, to confirm that that was her niece and that that was the time frame. She had worn her hair that way when she was 14. Okay. We had handed the tape to police. He's indicted in July 2002. It took 6 years to go to trial.
Yeah, I
Now,
remember that.
you or I are accused of a crime far less than raping a 14-year-old. We're going to be in behind bars in no time at all.
Yeah.
This broke every record in Cook County, and the judge, a lousy, in my opinion, uh, biased for the defense jurist, consistently ruled for Kelly at every turn. By the time it got
And
to court,
he had an attorney with a lot of sway.
he had an attorney who self-professed mob attorney, and he had a lot of money. He was at the height of his fame. While he was awaiting trial, the Ignition Remix comes out. He'd never been bigger. Uh, and the fact that it was reduced to one girl on one videotape, and neither she nor her parents testified. The jury was convinced it was Kelly, but they didn't hear from the victim. And they were shocked after they acquitted him
Wow.
when they were interviewed, saying, "We never knew there were other victims." There was not a word about Aaliyah. There was not a word about the then documented in civil lawsuits 5 underage victims. There was no sense that Kelly was a predator. Put it in context, Eric. This is the era of Tommy Lee and Pam Anderson having that sex tape stolen from their house. And then they decide to cash in on it and give it an official release. This wasn't that, my friend. This was horrifying. The young girl had the vacant, disembodied look of a rape victim, and she was an automaton being directed by Kelly on videotape in how to please him. And it was just sickening. That was a true low point, but people say, like, I'm Javert in Les Miserables, but you kept on it. I kept answering my phone, right? When young women come to someone and say, I've been hurt, no one believes me, I'm scared to talk out because he could destroy me, but I've seen what you've reported. I respect you. Will you tell my story?
Yeah.
I don't think you're a reporter, but I don't think you're a human being if you don't take that call. You or me walking down the street, we see a woman screaming in distress. We're going to do
You're
something.
gonna help.
We're going to
You're
do
gonna
it. We're going to call 911. We're going to blow the police whistle. We're going to, if you're a big guy like me or you, maybe you're stupid enough to take after somebody. All right. You don't sit there and do nothing. And so when I say it was always the women, the courage to trust a fat white rock critic with tattoos of all of his favorite bands up and down his arms,
Jim.
that is bravery, Eric. And
Yeah.
the least you can do as a reporter is to tell their stories and to try to do them justice.
Jim, I want to go way back to the time when you actually called the sergeant the first time and she said to you, I was wondering when something was going to happen, and then just hung up there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just think about, like, if you, people always say, like, if you could go back and talk to your younger self,
Mm-hmm.
if you never stayed on it at that point, Jim, if you never went beyond you getting hung up on, would we have justice today? Because everything that you did was vital
Well,
to getting justice for these young ladies, man.
Kenyette Tisha Barnes or Enike Odele of the Mute R. Kelly movement, it launched literally the day after the cult story I published in BuzzFeed in 2017. They say, without this work, Jim, we wouldn't have done this. We had heard for years, but we had had enough. Dream Hampton, who was the brilliant part of surviving R. Kelly.
Yeah.
The Lifetime people, different story. But Dream Hampton, the showrunner behind the first season of Surviving R. Kelly, says, without your reporting, we wouldn't have been able to do this. But I mean, mostly it was the women, and we always felt, Abden and me and Mary, that we were late to this story at the end of 2000 because victim number 1, Tiffany Hawkins, was 1991.
Right.
Aaliyah was 1995 and 1996. I always felt guilty that we hadn't gotten there sooner.
So all these things are happening around, and these are court documents, and then
Yeah.
settlements going out, and there was actually an attorney that was actually in Chicago, and everyone
Yep.
said, if you want money, you go to this attorney,
Yeah.
and she'll get you a settlement. But what was the music industry saying? I mean, like the labels. I mean, how could they say, like there has to be some kind of morality to say, hey, you're a big artist, and we need to know if these things are true, or what's happening, or we can't have you on the label.
You you
What
didn't
is
you
the music
didn't
industry saying?
you didn't just say morality and music industry in the same sentence, did you, Eric? Look, Jive Records is started by a South African man in London, Clive Calder, and it is run by a Jewish fellow in New York, Barry Weiss. They were well aware of the hush money settlements being paid to underage women. They were well
Mm,
aware of the Aaliyah statutory rape. There was money to be made, and they weren't going to derail the gravy train. The
mhm,
music industry is complicit, from the lowliest tape operator and studio gopher to Clive Calder and Barry Weiss at the top of Jive Records. They
mhm.
knew about this behavior for decades. They turned a blind eye. As long as money was being made, Kelly sold 100 million records, about 70 million of his own. And then let's tack on the artists he produced, everyone from Whitney Houston and Celine
Yeah,
Dion to Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson. Oh, yeah. I remember asking people who were in Chicago Recording Company what was the conversation like between those two. Kelly wrote "You Are Not Alone" about Aaliyah, but Jackson makes it a hit, and it spoke to both of the accusations against both of those men, really, in retrospect. But Kelly never made a secret. What was the title of the album he wrote and produced for Aaliyah?
Age ain't nothing but a number.
It was there in a very Dostoevsky crime and punishment way. He was announcing his crimes, and perhaps, if you want to play armchair psychiatrist, something I always resist, perhaps saying, catch me if you can, stop me if you will. To be clear, the many, many, many young women who trusted me with their stories, they never said, I hate the SOB, lock them away for life.
Hmm.
They always said, brother has a problem. Brother needs help. Brother's got to stop.
That's quoted in your book too.
Again
So,
and again,
yeah.
Eric, I heard those words more than any other. And the other sentence I heard more of. Now, I do not speak for Black women. I am merely amplifying what dozens have told me. I was a young Black girl who was going to believe me. They don't count in our system. And wiser men than me have said that. Malcolm X,
Yeah.
and many others. Young Black girls, we don't believe women in general.
Mhm.
And even despite the FBI statistics, only 40% of sexual assaults are ever reported to the criminal justice system, which I say
Mhm.
in quotes because we know the problems, right?
Yeah, and even probably a lot less among African American
And
women.
even less among African American women. And the FBI, not a liberal organization, says that of the 40% reported, less than 1% turn out to be false accusations.
Wow.
So
So
if you factor in
that's a
100 women,
discouragement in
that's a
itself.
discouragement. This is not a plague of women making false accusations against men. And what I have been saying since the sentencing, we didn't believe Anita Hill when she went to Capitol Hill with very credible accusations of sexual harassment. We didn't believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford 2 decades later when she went to Capitol Hill with very credible accusations of rape. And now those two men who sit on the Supreme Court help take away a woman's right to control her own body.
Wow.
This is a
Wow.
bigger story. Now, the Kelly story is plenty big in itself. As a pop music lover and critic and historian, men have been treating women badly in popular music since the era of the Bobby Soxers until last week. But no one, we have to take a breath because I don't think this has sunk into people. No one in the history of popular music, name your favorite villain, has ever been convicted of the breadth and depth of crimes as Robert Sylvester Kelly. And that was in the first federal trial. There's the second is going to start in Chicago in August. He is truly the world's greatest, to borrow one of his song titles, to which I would only append predator, abuser.
Wow. So, you brought up the album "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number" that he did. Do you feel like a lot of the things that he was doing, he was hiding, and not even hiding in his lyrics, that he was just putting it out there?
I'm always haunted by something that his half brother, Killer Kelly, told me. He
Hmm.
said, and this was towards the end of reporting for the book, that sick MFer is talking to other sick MFers who are on his level. Now, I understand the power of music.
Hmm.
If I Believe I Can Fly played at your kid's kindergarten graduation,
My
and
kid, my 5-year-old sings it today.
Step in the Name of Love was your
Hmm.
wedding song, and Ignition Remix was the party jam of every backyard barbecue you ever went to, that music in some ways is yours as much as
Yep.
it is his. I
Hmm.
understand that. And we
Hmm.
can have a philosophical discussion about separating the art and the artist. But Kelly consistently, in the vast body of his work, was championing an unfettered vision of hedonism that said, I will take my pleasure where I desire with no regard for who I hurt. All right. And if you
Hmm.
listen again with fresh ears and think about that, he never made a secret. Famously, after the acquittal in 2008, he does an interview with Torre. Torre asks him, do you like young girls? And he takes a serious moment and he says, how young we talking? Right?
Hmm.
He didn't make a secret of this. It's just that those black girls didn't matter to anyone. And, people say, how did you maintain? Well, first of all, I just answered the phone. I was
Hmm.
always here. I never twisted anyone's arm to talk. In some cases, it took them 9 months to decide to go on the record or to speak to me at all. In some cases, it took 5 years. Geronda
Yeah.
Pace, who was the first witness who testified in Brooklyn. But I had a picture. Abden and I went to Kenwood Academy, which is one of the most prestigious public high schools in Chicago. Kelly attended it, didn't graduate because by his own admission, he cannot read.
Hmm.
We pulled the yearbook. We saw the picture of some of his victims, the one in particular, Tiffany, with braces on, a volleyball player. This was not a bitch, a hoe, a gold digger, right? This was our daughter, man. Yours, mine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The skin color is irrelevant. It's a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And, that was the motivation, realizing and bothering to listen to the people he hurt. You know, are they all perfect? No, a lot of them were screwed up kids who made mistakes, who thought he really loves me. He's going to make me a star like he made Aaliyah a star,
No,
right?
they believed it, and they
They
believed
believed.
it
They
because
believed.
at the time there was no YouTube or Instagram to get them famous. So if they felt they had a connection, they felt like this is what they had to do or go through it,
Well,
right?
and kids do dumb things. Who
Yeah.
hasn't bought booze underage? Who hasn't been seen by the cops smoking weed in the park? That's what 15-year-olds do, for God's
Mhm.
sake.
But why? So at that point, why did they? When I say they, the police department, because some of this could have been nipped in the bud, and a lot of people could have stopped a lot of the hurt earlier on if people would just listen. So
Well,
why is it that they hang up and they just didn't do
no.
anything else from that point?
No, the sex crimes investigators were diligent. It
Okay.
often it is easy to paint the Chicago Police Department, who, let us not forget, shot Laquan McDonald 16 times in the back walking away.
Mhm.
All right, it is easy to paint them with one brush. The white investigators on that squad knew that what he was doing and tried to stop it. But there's a
Wow.
complex system in Chicago. The courts failed these black girls. The schools failed these black girls. Where's the principal of Kenwood Academy or Whitney Young who allowed him to come and talk to the choir classes of 14 and 15-year-olds?
Mm-hmm.
Journalism failed because it was only the Sun-Times. The Black Church failed. Reverend James Meeks, right-hand man to Jesse Jackson, was on TV with Kelly at his side as his spiritual advisor and
With Ed
busing.
Gordon.
Yeah, with Ed Gordon, and busing school buses full of kindergarten kids in free R. Kelly T-shirts to his court appearances all the way from 2002 to 2008. Most of all, the music industry failed, which we've already talked about. There were a handful of people of good conscience, but there were also supervillains. We heard at the trial in Brooklyn, there were cops, Chicago cops, who in their off-duty hours worked security for Kelly at triple the pay of the cop, right? And they saw this shit, Eric. There is no way it was not possible. We had one cop testify in Brooklyn. Well, I never saw anything. Did you ask the girls their ages? What? I wasn't carding them. I mean, come on. And there were parents. The girl in the videotapes parents would bring her to the recording studio with a pillow and a sleeping bag.
So now let's go to like the first trial, which took like 6 years, which is unheard of. Before that, he's arrested in Florida. He does like a $750,000 bond. He's immediately
and he pays in cash.
Pays in cash. Immediately whisked away to Chicago right after that. And then court proceedings take forever and a day. In the meantime, hit after hit. I mean, you couldn't turn on the song, and I'll be honest with you. If I told you that I never jammed an R. Kelly song or listened to it, I'd be lying.
Of course.
But in the meantime, from that time, you turn on the radio, almost every song you heard, either he sang himself or he produced, like you talked about the other 30 million records that were out there for other artists or produced or penned for him. And so now we have this delay in court. The judge gets hurt. They break their leg or something falling off of a ladder.
All of that was BS. One of the prosecutors had a baby. Yeah. I mean, they were slowing down the wheels of justice. The money was flowing to every day. That girl who was 14 on the tape, and quite obviously so, got a little older. And it was unclear whether they were going to subpoena her. Ultimately, they didn't, because they felt she has been victimized enough to subpoena her and force her to testify and lie on the stand. Is just raping her again. But it was bought for Chicago justice. It's BS. And race is at the center of everything, Eric. I don't have to tell you. Far too many people of color are behind bars, wrongly convicted, okay? But let's just ruminate on how lucky, quote unquote, Kelly was. There's a half hour. That's a long time. Think of an average sitcom, right? A half hour of horror, and he's acquitted. In Florida, when they arrested him on the Chicago charges, the cops, the sheriff's office, went into the vacation home. He had two, one for the family and one where he partied with his boys. And they find all of these video cameras set up, and they confiscate the video cameras. And on those video cameras are images of him having sexual contact with the 14-year-old, other underage women as well, and legal women participating in these threesomes. That's thrown out in the state of Florida as illegal search and seizure. If somebody calls and says, I'm smelling weed from next door, back when it was illegal, and the cops knock on the door, they open the door and they see like a naked 14-year-old, a pound of coke and 2 pounds of weed on the coffee table, that's like your stupidity. You're done, right?
Man. Yeah.
Kelly was the only brother in the history of the freaking state of Florida to get off on an obvious crime. They have images, right? I mean, the man had an incredible amount of luck combined with an extraordinary amount. When he sings in I Admit, the last publicly released song before he is arrested, that I am a broke ass nigga, he is singing it because he is broke, right?
Yeah, he said I'm a broke ass legend.
A broke ass legend. Yeah. All
Yep.
right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Different. I heard 3 or 4 different recordings of that one because a source in the camp is leaking it to me. And it wasn't until the last minute he name drops me in there.
Yeah, I heard that.
He's broke because he squandered $500 million on lawyers and hush money and thugs to threaten these women, these young girls and their families. It's truly extraordinary. He earned $1 billion for Jive and $500 million for himself.
He was a cash cow.
He was a cash cow.
He was a cash cow. So now with the Aaliyah thing, because Aaliyah, her uncle was his manager, and now just recently, like, he's come out and he started, kind of talking up for her. But I mean, where was the protection for her? And I'm not sitting here. I'm not going to be one of those people who say, where were the parents and all that stuff? I'll let everyone else on the outside do all that stuff. But, it seemed like after all this came out, there was like this line of separation between the two of them. You never saw them in the same event.
They never spoke again. Within hours of that illegal marriage, they were separated, and then it was annulled in the courts shortly thereafter. Look, I think my answer to this is for both all the people who say, where were the parents?
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of people.
Aaliyah was just another 15-year-old. Okay.
Yeah.
There's the added factor that the people around both her and Kelly don't want to derail these careers. But at the end of the day, she's a 15-year-old sophomore from the Detroit School of the Performing Arts.
Absolutely.
It is easy to say, where were the parents? In many cases, we are underestimating the power of the predator, right? How many parents in the white Irish Catholic world trust the parish priests with their little altar boy? And, and Father would never do that. Why are you saying this about Father? All right.
Right.
Let's look at JonBenet Ramsey. Super sexualizing a 6 or 7-year-old toddler as a beauty queen. Right? Where were the parents there? The strongest drug in our society is this lust for fame. And I think that, what I heard so often from parents is, I knew there was stuff, there were rumors, he was acquitted, but I was going to be by my daughter's side the whole time. He was never going to be alone with her. And that is people lying to themselves because they want to believe, the same way Mrs. Murphy believes that the father at the parish would never, right? Yeah, of course he can be alone with he's not going to be alone. There's going to be another altar boy there, right? I mean, come on. The predator is expert at manipulating people to his own devices. I'm a music critic. I had to become expert on this. The number of criminal sexual psychiatrists and investigators that I've talked to, we still don't understand underage predators, really. What drives them, what compels them. And of course, Kelly, like Michael Jackson, had a very difficult, troubled, abusive upbringing. You can't forgive, because so many of the experts have told me the vast majority of people abused as children, in fact, become defenders of children, right? And some small percentage of abuse victims then act out the abuse that was perpetrated on them. But it crystallized for me early on when one of his right-hand men who came up with him and was the road manager says to me,
Demetrius Smith
says, you got to understand, Jim, night after night in the green room after the show, there are 20 gorgeous, half-naked women who will do anything for him, 20, 21 years old. And then there's the little girl in the corner staring at her shoes, too shy to talk to anyone, hiding her acne. And night after night after night, that is who he goes after. And that's how we can get technical. It is not pedophilia. Pedophilia is prepubescent kids. Ephebophilia is the term for grown men drawn to pubescent, just about 12, 13, 14, 15, preteen teens, whatever. The power relations here of him ruining the lives of so many young girls for 30 years in the full glare of the brightest spotlight in the music world. It's just astonishing. And much research has been done by brilliant men and women about the early sexualization of young girls of color, Black and Latinx. We don't see the 14-year-old Black girl the same way we see the 14-year-old white girl. And by we, even the Black community, right? They are sexualized early. None of that forgives it. Even if she thought she was willing, she didn't sign up for a relationship that at the end she attempts suicide. That happened to several of the young girls, that she's forced to have an abortion, that she's physically and mentally abused, that he urinates in her mouth, that he forces her to eat her own feces when she breaks daddy's rules. All of this court testimony in federal court. Okay.
Wow.
So no allegedly required anymore. He's convicted.
So now the BuzzFeed article, when, it seemed like everything kind of went to sleep.
Yeah.
And then when that article came out, it just woke everything up again. And that was kind of the catalyst of when people stopped showing up to shows, shows were being canceled and everything else. Now, and that part did not come out of nowhere for you, because you had people reaching out to you, telling you what they were going through.
Yeah. I spent 9 months working on that story and accumulating more and more evidence. First, the Savages contacted me and trusted me. And the tragedy of this is their daughter is still defending Kelly. She's the last
Jocelyn.
Joy Savage, yeah.
Okay.
And then the Clarys, and then Kitty Jones and Asante McGee, other women, other people who'd worked for that situation. By 2015, 2017, he is splitting his time like a snowbird. The cold months in Chicago, he goes to Atlanta. That when it's too hot in Atlanta, he comes home to Chicago, maintaining this cult of 6 to 8 women at different times, some of them underage, how they dress, when they eat, when they sleep, how they pleasure him in video encounters, when they break his rules, all of this complex. Again, I'm a reporter, but I'm not. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little slow. The first time some of these sources are telling me it's like the Manson cult, I'm saying, Charles Manson, that's 1969, what kind of freakiness and then you hear it the 4th and the 5th and the 6th times, and you see emails and texts and photographs and on the record interviews, and you say, I think that since it wasn't televised because it's in federal court, and since the transcripts cost $200 or $300 a day for 6 weeks, so many people are still unaware, other than the headlines, of the reporters who were hamstrung because they were not allowed in the courtroom. They were in an overflow room with a crappy video and audio feed.
Like just a monitor.
Just a monitor that's going in and out, right? The things that were said in federal court are mind-blowing.
Were you surprised by anything that was said?
Yeah, I had. There were things I'd never read. I had heard about his proclivities toward young boys, but I had never spoken to one. We had 2 underage boys testify in Brooklyn. When the one young girl reads the letter she wrote to herself at age 17 about the penalties of not following daddy's rules, including eating her own feces, and what, always try to please daddy. If he burps or farts, you say, thank you, daddy. You never question what daddy says, right? This is, and here she is,
mind blowing, man,
in her mid-20s reading this letter to herself. And you just, this is sick. Minus the murders, this is Manson level cult.
Wow. Man, so you yourself, I mean, you thought not heard it all, but heard most of it when
Yeah.
you are in the federal court, and then you're just mind blown by some of the things that you've gotten. And as far as I saw, I mean, there were so many people on the defense side as far as witnesses, but he didn't have a lot of support.
He
Not at
didn't. He
all.
didn't have. He had a crummy 5 or 6 defense witnesses, and of course, he didn't testify. Has to be underscored that to this day, after conviction and after sentencing, he has still not expressed remorse for the lives he ruined, much less any culpability. I don't think he sees it that way. There was testimony in court, and I wasn't there. I was writing for the New Yorker, and I had the benefit of them funding the transcripts every day, which are the reading is horrifying. And I felt I covered it better than the people there because they were so hamstrung.
Wow.
You know,
It's almost like you had an insight into
I
it
had
because
an insight.
you've
Yeah.
seen this before. Yeah.
I've seen it before, and some of the women had first trusted me to tell their stories. Others were completely new to me, which is horrifying, given that I know the names and have talked to 68 women over the years. I believe the real
68.
68, and I believe the real total's well over 100, because there were so many witnesses, both in the upcoming Chicago federal trial and the Brooklyn trial, that I'd never even heard of. Right? Not even secondhand. I was there with so and so. No, I've never even heard. So, yeah, there were things that blew my mind in trial and were truly sickening. And yet, you still had people every day of those proceedings. R. Kelly's being railroaded. I hear from some of them. They get my number.
Mhm.
And what about this video on YouTube?
Mhm.
Read the freaking transcript, right? 22 victims testified. If they all lied on the stand, they committed a felony of perjury, right? They're not lying. And then look at the documentation, the videos, and the emails, and the texts, and the audio
Wow.
recordings. I mean, come on. Too many black men wrongly in prison. We know that. Okay?
Mhm.
This is not one of them.
So when did people start listening? Was it after the BuzzFeed article came up that they woke up and they started paying attention? Because that's when you really started to see it have an
Yeah.
effect on his career at the time.
Yeah. Well, like I said, BuzzFeed leads to, per Kenyette Tisha Barnes and Oronike Oatley, mute R. Kelly. And BuzzFeed leads to Dream Hampton surviving R. Kelly. But I
Mhm.
really think it's only with the power of television and these women, one after another, after another, after another, coming into your living room and you seeing she's just like my sister. She's just like my
Mhm.
aunt. You seeing these women that for 2 decades, I had sat one-on-one in coffee shops and conference rooms at the newspaper, hearing these stories from these women. And now America's hearing them. And some of them are a little hard to believe, but not all of them. All
Right.
right. Not
Yeah.
all. People are complicated. Everyone is complicated. There's no ultimate black, ultimate white. There are shades of gray. But all of these stories, the cumulative effect is can't be denied.
I think one of the most powerful scenes in that I mean all the women they had their testimonies were heart-wrenching, man, just pulled on you. But just seeing that mother pull her daughter out of the hotel
Yeah.
at the time, that was probably one of the scenes where I think it really clicked for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there were people. It was a lot of bravery to be able to create
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
That was a lot of bravery. A lot.
Dominique Gardner, who was pulled out by her mother, first broke her silence with me. And it was 9 months before she decided to talk. And she has still not given an in-depth interview to anyone else to this day. She doesn't speak in Surviving R. Kelly. You just see her mom going to rescue her. And then she went back, and then she split for good. I mean, it's a complicated story. She's now a
Yeah.
young mom in a happy relationship. And I haven't spoken to her since because her lawyer was furious that she talked to me. I didn't twist her arm. It took her 9 months to decide to talk. And what she said was complicated, Eric. I
Man.
loved him. He loved me. I mean, she doesn't know how to think. Part of her hates him. Part of her still loves him. And, it's complicated, I think, for all of these women. But you know what? In every sexual assault trial, anywhere in the world, it is complicated for every victim. Do I want to expose myself and speak the truth? I can't put myself through that. And then, Kelly, there's the added ambivalence of when it was good. I mean, Dominique said to me, when it was good, Jim, it was really, really good. And when it was bad, it was horrible. What do you mean,
Wow.
Dominique? He beat me. He whipped me with an electric cord. He choked me. He refused to let me eat. He slapped me. I was like, but I loved him and I thought he loved me. But again, cops on the beat, the good ones, will tell you they show up at domestic abuse calls and the woman is battered and bleeding. And so it was a misunderstanding. Nothing happened here. The victims often become under the sway of their victimizers until it's too
Yeah.
late and they wind up dead.
Man, what a shame. What a shame. And there are people. So now it seems like a lot of this stuff was really covered up because there was money going around.
Yeah.
There was a lot of money. Now, tell me about the one attorney. I think Loggins was the name.
Susan
The
E.
one
Logan.
attorney. Well, she was like the settlement queen at the time.
Yeah.
For the young girls, everyone would just go there to get a payday.
Yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, at some point, is there a duty and responsibility that she should have to say, hey, authorities, you guys got to look into this. This is what I received.
She doesn't see it that way. The rare occasions when she has spoken to me on the record, I'm a defense attorney. I don't believe that these victims were going to get justice in criminal court. They came to me as a civil attorney. They knew that's what I did. She filed the first several lawsuits by the first victims in court. And then she began what I called a settlement factory. I believe there were a dozen or so settlements. A girl would come to her with the story. She would send them to a private investigator in the Chicago suburb of Hinsdale, take a lie detector test. She'd go to Kelly's lawyers and say, I have another one. Here's the story. What's this one worth to you? And they would get, and we're talking chump change. We're talking 100, 200 grand. We're not talking millions. We're talking chump change, of which she kept 40%. All right. But the record company's aware. Kelly is an odd combination of super street smart and dumb. The first lawsuit, he actually tried to recoup the hush money to Tiffany Hawkins from his insurance company.
Really?
Yeah, he filed an insurance claim. He was eventually laughed out of court on that one, but he filed a civil lawsuit. Insurance.
I think that's
company.
in your book. I think I remember that in your book.
This is why the book, even if you think you know everything about this story, look, there's two reasons for the book. Number one is a message about journalism, right? But number two is these many, many systems that all failed, right? All failed these young Black girls. And that is the problem to be dealt with moving forward. R. Kelly is now never going to come out of federal prison unless he's on a walker. He would be 85, right? If he gets out. And that's not counting whatever happens at the second federal trial or the state of Illinois trial or the state of Minnesota trial. He's done, right? But what remains, Eric, is why are Black women not treated the same in court? And that's, of course, an adjunct to why are Black men treated.
You had a line about that. You said if these women were a different color, things would have been different.
Again, that's me amplifying what they've told me again and again and again. Yeah. Yeah, but often
Man.
many of these women have said if there was one white girl in the wealthy suburb of Winnetka, this would have been a different story.
Well, I think one of the first things you do when someone says that they've been hurt, you have to listen. It's just like if my
Yeah,
kids come to me and they said, "I'm hurt," you listen.
yeah,
And I say that because, like, I remember when I think he was arrested in Chicago, like, by, I think Cook County
yeah,
arrested him. One of the first things that his lawyer came out and just discredited all these people by calling them liars immediately,
yeah, yeah,
you know, which seemed to be very unfortunate because later he was not his attorney anymore. I think
yeah.
they had, it's like a huge attorney change or whatever. But through all of this, I mean, does he need help? Does he have a problem? Or
I don't know what part of it is a psychological problem and what part of it is sheer ego and hubris. We heard a young victim testify in Brooklyn who said, he once said to me, look at Jerry Lee Lewis. He
Yep.
got away with it. He was able to do whatever he want. I should get away with it. I'm a genius. We should be treated differently. So what part of it is this psychological compulsion? Brother needs help. What part of it is the sickness? And what part
Hmm.
of it is he doesn't give a fuck about any other human being? He never
Wow.
has. I mean, there are many aspects of the story that still are unexamined. His attorney in federal court before the sentencing, and he has said in public now several times he was abused by his older sister, right,
Hmm.
as well as an older man.
Yep.
Uh, but his sister is, I have heard, very religious, downstate Illinois, remarried, different name, refuses to be found, has never spoken out. Accusing an older woman of abusing a young boy is as bad as
Hmm.
the other way around. No defense. She's not on the record. Did this happen? Did it not happen? It certainly doesn't forgive anything. And
Right.
she was working cleaning toilets and cleaning his mansion for years after he made it rich.
Really? I thought like they just totally didn't
No,
talk and
no,
speak
no,
at all.
no, no. I had that on members of the family who told me that. And he treated his two half brothers like crap. He treated his half sister like crap. He treated everyone who ever worked for him like crap. The man has not engendered loyalty. Sometimes it would last for a decade or two, right? But there are two people indicted with him as part of his racketeering enterprise in Chicago. And both of them he eventually started treating like crap, which is a kind of the drug lord or the mafia don has to treat his people well, or
Yeah.
those people turn witnesses against him. And clearly, the federal government is hoping that some of these people flip on him.
Well, I mean, like right now, I mean, the folks who are his co-conspirators or the folks who are charged with him, they have to look on and say like, hey man, he got 30 years, man.
Right,
And
right.
there's a long paper trail. And I think I sent you the notes. I had an interview with an attorney and he said when the feds come after you, they're ready.
They are ready.
And they
Three
don't and
dozen
they don't come to
investigators.
lose.
No, they interviewed everyone I ever spoke to in my book when they spread out across the country in 2018. Three dozen investigators. There was nobody that I had ever spoken to that they didn't contact. Not all of them trusted the cops. And that was always
Mhm.
part of the problem too. Even the diligent small group of Chicago cops way back in 2000. Um, you know, the Black community has been treated so poorly by institutional justice,
Mhm.
cops, and courts for so long. They're not going to talk to the cops, right? But me, as a fat white music geek, they were going to trust me. And then with every story, I earned more trust,
Right.
because I had reported the truth.
And then I want to go back to something you talking about the truth too. There has nothing that you've ever reported or even written about that has had to have been redacted. at
Nothing.
all.
No, not a single correction, clarification, much less a lawsuit. No, it all stands. 22 years of reporting stands on the record.
So now we brought up the Jerry Lee Lewis, and I've had this discussion with other people before, and they always say, like, people's creativity come at a price. Was the price for him like liking underage girls? Or you see someone like Elvis? Elvis married his daughter, his wife, at 14 years old,
Yeah.
right? So but they're making a movie about Elvis. And do you think that that's why a lot of people in the black community are like, like, hey, leave him alone. Look at Elvis, or look at Jerry Lee Lewis. Do you think that's how people are justifying it, because they're so in love with the music?
We could probably talk for an hour about the ethics of Elvis Presley and Priscilla Bolet, or Jerry Lee Lewis and his second cousin, right? Those are marriages that lasted decades, and they were with one woman. Again, I say to you, 68 women whose names I know, several dozen more involved in the federal trials. Nobody has the body count that R. Kelly has. There's a
Wow.
difference between, we throw more, Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones, underage wife. Okay. All right. Yes. Men have been treating badly women in pop music since the era of the Bobby Soxers, Jimmy Page, David Bowie. Where are the dozens and dozens and dozens of victims? Nobody has that body count like R. Kelly. It is really easy to forgive the hedonism of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Yeah, R&B, hip hop, whatever you want to say, right? The body count speaks.
Jim, what inspired you to pen the book? Because I would tell anyone that has ever doubted your reporting, or thinking that you've got it out for him, that they read that book. Because, man, I mean, you take people through, just a timeline journey throughout the book.
I never wanted to write that book. I was convinced by my editor that it was needed because of that thing I was talking about. The courts, the schools, the church, the journalism, the music industry all failed these young Black girls. I felt I owed it all of them who had trusted me for all of these individual stories for 22 years. Besides R. Kelly and whether or not he would ever be brought to justice, because it wasn't clear when I started writing the book. It only became clear a couple of weeks ago, sentenced. I felt I owed them. How did this happen, right? That's the question to take away from here. How did this happen? Because if we don't understand that, it's going to happen again. It's happening right now, I have no doubt. Maybe
So,
not to
Jim,
the extent of R. Kelly, but it
and let's
shouldn't,
hope it never ever gets to that extent. Let's hope it
man, it
never ever
shouldn't,
gets
it
there.
shouldn't be one teacher, right? And one student. It just shouldn't be.
So, Jim, when you found out, I know this isn't about you, and it's about you. You did a lot. You did it for those victims, and so this would never happen again. But when you found out that he got sentenced to 30 years, um, did you feel like this is what it's for? Did you feel like you had done the right thing by all these people? And what was that feeling that you had? I'm not saying that it's all about you, but what is that feeling?
Well,
Um,
I always defer to the women, Eric. I mean,
yeah.
when he's convicted, what I heard from those who I'm still in touch with is, I'm glad I was finally believed in a court of law,
Wow.
and but it's too little, too late for that damage to be repaired for me. So I think that's the message: too little, too late. But also, it is not satisfying in any way. This man was unequivocally a musical genius,
Yeah.
okay? And to see the damage that he did with his music as opposed to bringing good to the world makes me depressed. I was proud to hear put into court records with documenting evidence, all of the things I'd reported. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just really sad. I mean, I am a punk rocker, okay?
Mhm.
I am not freaking Bono of U2. We can sing together and feed Africa. No. Decades of imperialism, capitalism, and racism are not going to be erased by your stupid song, U2. All right, I'm not
Mhm.
that. But I think of Mavis Staples, who just turned 82, walking arm in arm with her sisters and Dr. King as the hoses in Alabama and Mississippi are turned on her and the dogs are let loose and the billy clubs are swinging. I am not saying civil rights had some progress. We ain't there yet because of her singing. I am saying her singing inspired us to fight the fight. That is the power I believe that music has. And to think that R. Kelly could have done that, and for some people did, I believe
Mhm.
I Can Fly, but at the cost of 68 women whose names I know. I mean, it is horrible. There is not a lot of great music that comes from the forces of hatred. Name for me a great anti-Semitic band. Name for me a great white power band. Name for
Mm.
me a great Nazi band. No, there's not. For the
Yeah.
most part, music inspires and uplifts, and what we're left with in the Kelly legacy, and Jackson's is just as complicated. But Michael Jackson's is easier to deal with. My life would be very poor indeed if I had to cut out the Jackson 5 or all the great solo albums. Up Against the Wall is the masterpiece, not Thriller. But whatever, we could have that debate, right? It'd be great conversation, right? All right. It's not until the last two albums, History and Invincible, that he
Mhm.
begins protesting his innocence. Media, do your jobs. You're going to crucify me like you crucify the Lord, right? Those credible accusations of abusing young boys, right? He takes on the Santa Barbara County DA by name, right? And when he is singing about those issues, I can't ignore them, right? I can still listen to Jackson 5 and all the other solo albums. Ben, a love song to a rat. What the hell was that about? Okay. With Kelly, it's harder to separate because we now know what his sex in the kitchen and trapped in the closet and I want to be your sexosaurus. We know
Mhm.
what all of that meant, and it meant 15-year-olds, right? So now we're left with this mess. What do we do with these 30 years of music? And that's
Yeah.
unprecedented too. That's
Yeah.
really, and look, Charles Manson's music is still streaming on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. David Koresh, who had the cult in Waco that all died,
Mhm.
and is still streaming on Apple and Spotify. People collected John Wayne Gacy, murderer of 36 homosexual boys. They collected his jailhouse paintings of clown faces. There are some, to borrow Carrie Kelly's phrase to me, some sick AMFers who are drawn to this evil.
It was interesting you bring up Carrie Kelly because at one point there were some things that he was saying that were uh, not in his brother's best interest, and
Yeah,
then
he's
now
gone back and
now
forth. He's
yeah.
gone, he's gone, and so has Bruce, the other half brother. The only one we've never heard from is Teresa, the sister.
Mhm.
And I just feel, I mean, maybe that woman did what he's accused her of, and maybe she didn't, right? We've never heard her speak, right? It was a messed up upbringing. I've gotten that from everyone close to him who've talked to me over the years. Um, yeah, they've all gone back and forth, Eric, at different times. He's paying them and then he's not paying them. And then that affects what they're saying and what they're not saying. And, it's sad.
Yeah, it is, man. And just to like I told you even in the call, I mean, years ago, I'd be lying to you if I told you I'd never heard a song, danced a song, went to a
Yeah.
concert or anything like that. But now, when you have your own children, your own daughters, and you just have to think, could I support that? And the
Yeah.
answer is you can't. You
Yeah.
really can't. Well, Jim, I think you've done some fine work, man, and I believe what your work has also brought some peace to some people, and also probably help some future people avoid something happening to them. And I know it's always, with you, it's always about those victims and about those women. And I'm going to tell you, my man, you did your job. You did your job.
Well, somebody asked me about this yesterday from Australia, and I defer to Tarana Burke, who launched hashtag Me Too more than
Mm-hmm.
a decade before everybody gets excited because Harvey Weinstein preyed on white actresses.
Mm-hmm.
Tarana and I were talking, and she once kind of side eye wisely says to me, "You get the messages still, right?" And we're not talking about the Kelly story. There is so much abuse of young women out there. I
Wow.
can't take this on again, Eric. You know, it
I was
it
going to ask
damn
you
it
that.
damn near killed me the first
I
time.
was gonna ask you
I'd
that
like to
because
be
it just
done. And
in reading your book, I mean, heck, someone's thrown bricks through your window, shot at your house.
yeah,
You've had some personal threats
yeah.
before. If this was approached to you again, would you go through with it?
No, one of the reasons I do these interviews and I talk plenty to other young journalists who say, "How do I do these stories?" I now refer people who seem credible to other reporters.
Wow.
I'm 57, man. I want to talk to you about the Yola record and the new Wet Leg record, and I want to teach my
Right.
students at Columbia College. I don't think I have this in me again. And Tarana too, and what she was saying is the amount of pain that people come to her with.
Man.
You can't take all of that on, and that's the reason to keep talking about it, because it's system wide, it's endemic, and it's if we have made two steps forward with both Me Too and Black Lives Matter, we damn well know we've also made one big jump back for everyone. Bill Cosby's out,
Yeah.
acquitted on a technicality, and Harvey Weinstein is in jail, but Jeffrey Epstein, you know, deprived his victims of justice. And where are the enablers and co-conspirators? I freaked the fuck out of a BBC reporter during a live interview yesterday when I said, yeah, well, Ghislaine Maxwell convicted in the Epstein case, but Prince Andrew, and let's not talk about Prince Andrew. Well, motherfucker, we got to talk about Prince Andrew, and we got to talk about everybody else,
Yeah.
because there has been no penalty. Dream Hampton
And
says
no one's above the law, man.
Jive Records, right, ought to be forced to give a big chunk of the income from R. Kelly to victims' organizations. Right. And Jive was one fucked up label, man. Britney Spears, look at the mess they made of her, in sync with
Wow.
the sexual abuse of those boys. Right. I mean, and they ain't paid any penalty. Clive
Damn.
Calder sits in retirement under a palm tree on one of the Cayman Islands. All
So
right.
what happens to his music? All of it. I mean, who has it? Who owns it?
Well, it's on Spotify streaming, and Apple
So
and Amazon.
someone's making money.
Someone's making money. It's not going to him. He's in so much debt. I am a broke ass legend. I think there's no right or wrong. I think art is so subjective to us individually. If you
Mm-hmm.
tell me I still love I Believe I Can Fly, I condemn everything he did, but I love the song, I don't think you're wrong. If you say to me, if I'm in a club or at a wedding and I hear his music, I get sick to my stomach, and if the DJ won't turn it off, I leave. I don't think you're right. No wrong or right. There's only the individual answer that each of us will have. The only thing that is, undeniably wrong is to not give a shit about his victims.
That is strong.
And I think
That
the,
is
the
strong,
Mute
and
R.
that's
Kelly
powerful.
movement had a really good capitalist point. It was not censorship, right? They are saying, look, let me put it in my terms. I like a chicken sandwich, right? I
Mm-hmm.
love me a good chicken sandwich. I'll go to Harold's Chicken in Chicago, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to go to Chick-fil-A because as good as that sandwich allegedly is, other chicken sandwich fans tell me, it is brought to you by a company that supports, teachers wearing guns and hates gay people, right?
Mm.
I don't agree with that. I ain't
Yeah.
going to go there. That's capitalism. I'm not going to
Mm.
give you my dollar, right? He's no
Right.
longer touring, so it's not a problem of concert ticket dollars. There is no more physical product, right? His 0.01 cent, which is not even going to go to him from the Spotify stream, I don't think we really have to worry about. And eventually there will be a civil lawsuit that says any money that trickles in to the Kelly estate from now on should go to the victims, right? There will be civil lawsuits that
Wow.
follow the criminal. But it's just capitalism. Don't give your money to companies that believe in evil shit.
Yeah. So this, man, it's just amazing to see, to go back to what you said about what Demetrius Smith said, like, there would be legal women, and he chose, the person in the corner with the braces who had acne issues.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything that you've done. I really do. I mean, there are going to be people who are going to be pissed off, and there may be some who just say, great job. But I think, everything that you did, you protected a lot of future women from getting hurt. You, Mary, and Abden Palace, you guys should be very proud of the work that you've done, because who knows, man, you could have saved the hell out of somebody in the next decade or 25 years from now, just from the work that you did back
Well,
then. So
it's Tiffany, it is Geronda, it is Giovante,
absolutely.
it is Dominique, it is that it's them, Eric.
It's them. It's
Yeah.
them. And you helped them, and you defended the future Dominiques, Gerondas, and everyone else. So thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you for
Well,
what you've
thank you
done.
for your interest, and
Yeah.
it
Thank
would
you.
be nice if people read the book.
Yeah, so let's tell them
Because-
about that book. Tell these people how to find that book, where to buy it. Me, I actually I went through it twice, even the audio version, and it was read by you, which I really like when the author reads the book, because you really get the true inflections of what they mean, how they mean it, and everything else. But I mean, shit,
Yeah.
just tap the button in your phone and get the book. I mean, if
Well,
that's
there
the
you go.
case,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Because I mean, it's about the systems failing. It's a bigger story,
Yeah,
and that's why it was worth doing.
yeah.
Um, yeah. I go
And
to the
notice the book.
library. I'm not saying I need your money because it's like
No, it's
Spotify.
about being informed. It's about being informed, and what it is. It's the book title is Soulless: The Case Against R. Kelly. It's
Yeah.
not Jim DeRogatis versus R. Kelly. It's the
No.
case, and like Jim said, he talks about just the failures of the system. It's a damn good read. It's damn near as chronological can get. And it gives you a great timeline from start to finish, and a lot of insight into, if you have been just a headline reader and you've been on one side of the fence, there's a lot of facts. And notice we said facts.
Yeah.
There's nothing that has had to have been redacted or taken back at all. Good stuff, really good stuff there, Jim.
Well, thank you, Eric, and
thank you,
good
man.
luck with the podcast.
Yeah, man, we're rocking, man. Let's stay in touch, my man. And just thank you for being a guest. And to everyone out there listening, if you feel this podcast has been good for you, and you actually just want to forward it on to someone else and see how I can help them, give us a 5-star rating, but and also give us a listen where everywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast, and go get that book from Jim DeRogatis, Soulless: The Case Against R. Kelly.
Have
Jim,
a good day,
thank
man.
you so much, man.
You bet.
Take care, brother. All right.
If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to give us a 5-star rating.